to Sticking to the Truth with Julie Jackson and Debbie Jansen. So grab some coffee and join us because we've got a big show today. Julene, I'm going to expose the mysteries of lies today.
Oh, Debbie, if anyone could do it, it would be you. I can't wait to bring some truth to this table today. Let's do it.
Okay, seriously. Julene and I are good Christian women and we don't cuss, but we're going to share a quote that describes a situation by using the word damned. I haven't said that. Anyway, used in that text, it's kind of like me saying that a person's life is going downhill. It's just they are damned if they do and damned if they don't. It's not a cuss word, but rather a description of a situation. And I just set you up for this quote because I don't say those words, Julie, and I know you don't either. Anyway, having cleared that up, I want to present Mark Twain's quote. Now, there were other people that claimed it was their quote, and it's like all quotes. It's kind of tossed around, but I think Mark Twain is the most popular for it. He said, there are three kinds of lies. There's a lie, there's a damned lie, and there's statistics. His quote suggests that statistics, while seemingly objective, can be manipulated and used to distort the truth, making them a more persuasive and dangerous form of deception than an outright lie. So here's the details. A lie is just a straightforward fabrication. It's a blatant distortion of the truth. So if I told you I was 16 with a skin disease that creates floppy and wrinkled skin, that's just an out-and-out lie. It's false, and you can tell it. A damned lie is sneaky, crafty, sly, dishonest, underhanded. These lies are often used to mislead or manipulate and are more difficult to detect. For example, let's pretend I catch Julene shoplifting, which I know I never would, Julie, but let's pretend. I confront her and say, hey, you can't do that. It's stealing. And Julene turns around and in her sweet, wonderful manner, she would say, I'm not stealing. This doesn't matter. You know, it's okay for baseball players to steal bases, isn't it? So what's the difference? If they can steal bases, then it should be okay for me to steal this stuff. And I would probably just be left standing there going, have you ever heard an argument like that before? Unfortunately, I have. And it does kind of take you back for a minute to think, well, what is really true in this? A statistical lie is a statement that uses statistics that are misleading or skewed. That misleading information allows people to draw false conclusions or support weak arguments. So if I said President Trump is a bad president because he likes nicknames, you might ask, well, how do you know? And I might say, I did a poll of all my friends who agreed that making up nicknames takes too much time and he couldn't possibly have the time to work for the country. So he's a bad president. Julene, why is that a statistical lie?
Because it can be manipulated. You know, we deal with this every single day, right?
Right.
Polls come out and probably they're tainted because maybe it's only a certain amount of like-minded people, right? If you polled all my friends, we're all living in the same vacuum, so to speak. And so, you know, we're not going to get a really complete, perspective of, the population, so to speak. And it's going to leave a whole bunch of other people that might have other opinions off the polling. And so, you know, I think too that when they ask questions that are so narrowly defined, like he's a bad president because he says mean things, or he calls people names, or his character because he's just a meanie, you know, we question his character. That what happens is that typically, you know, when people judge someone just based on one issue, they tend to exaggerate that one issue, right? And that it's kind of like when President Trump in his so-called State of the Union speech a week or two ago said, look, I could come up with the greatest cure for the worst disease and the Democrats still won't clap for me. You know, they have just honed in that they don't like him. They think he's a mean guy. He, you know, has called people names and therefore he's no good. He's a no president and he can't get the job done. And so, you know, statistics can be skewed if you don't poll, you know, the mass population and you don't, you know, ask these kind of leading questions that of course people are, you know, going to typically lean one way or the other. And so I just think like us, we call ourselves the motor mouth mama bears, you know, that doesn't mean we're not smart and we're not compassionate and we can't get the job done. So, you know, I think you just have to be very careful about those statistical lies because they sound like they must be legit, right?
Right.
But even those can be not credible and manipulated, clearly.
You're exactly right. You are. And thank you for explaining that. So let's talk about a big lie that has taken over our country. And let's see if we can figure it out. You up for it?
I'm up for it. Let's do it.
Okay. For years, counselors, psychiatrists, schools, and all types of political representatives have insisted that the only way to keep a child from transphobic suicide, now I'm talking about the suicide or the anxiety part, is to immediately begin changing their gender. Now, I've always wondered, what is their evidence? Because all I could ever find was that if they felt uncomfortable in any way in their skin, they would try suicide to heal the pain. And I knew that was false. All children and some young adults can often get confused and moan and groan about their lives. And what do they usually do? They pick something and they say, that's the problem. That's what's making me so sad and so bad. But what they need is a wise person to steer them to the truth and to the fact that they can overcome any anxious feelings they may have. After all, it didn't make sense that we tell overweight teens and adults, feel comfortable with the way you look. We say embrace it, enjoy it, and be proud of the skin that you're in. But children who don't feel comfortable accepting their own sex can't be led to accept the body they live in. Parents were encouraged not to help, but instead to insist on sex change surgeries. And if you didn't insist on it, the school or doctor would take them away. The Psychological Association decided that everyone can handle some physical attributes or life problems, but transphobic was just too dangerous. Did that seem crazy to you, Julene?
Crazy and dangerous. I mean, look, we know that feelings pass, right? Feelings are not final, especially during those teen years when, remember, your emotions and your hormones are like roller coasters. So to have these so-called experts and entities prey upon the vulnerable adolescent season or years is particularly dangerous, how they can manipulate and fill young people with ideas that could impact the rest of their life. I mean, to me, that is evil. There really is. Remember when RFK Jr. a few weeks ago said there is a war against our children. And we're seeing that, you know, this indoctrination, this anti-American woke curriculum that's causing them to be isolated and addictive. And, you know, we have to give them better help and hope over the long run. And it's got to start with us, you and me. We have to give these kids a bigger picture that, you know, feelings of uncertainty and confusion is normal during certain periods of your life. And we have to be there right with them. You know, mom and dad, grandma, grandpa, aunts and uncles, church communities, good, strong, you know, neighborhoods to walk them through this vulnerable time instead of being preyed upon by these entities.
I agree totally. I agree. You're exactly right. And it felt crazy to me because I have examples of people who have overcome great problems in their life, and they've used their brain to do it. I know a pastor who was abused by his mother. All his life, he simply wanted her love. Desperately needing her acceptance, he felt this pull and desire to be a woman, that maybe she would accept him if he was a woman. Yet he knew God had a different plan for his life. And instead of playing into those first urges and feelings that he had, he found strength in God and he fought against it. Now, I knew this man most of his life. I was a teenager when I met him and when he opened up and told me this. But I watched him remain a faithful and loving man, a wonderful father, had a great marriage, and a loving pastor his entire life. Mm-hmm. He did great things for God. He did things that I couldn't believe. So I know that you can overcome your problems. I know a lady, she's a best friend of mine, one of my great friends, and when she was a teenager, developed OCD. And it was just taking over her whole entire life. And she said, I didn't go to any psychiatrist or psychologist. I just knew it wasn't right. And so when I felt like compelled, I had to go do something, I would sit in a chair on my hands to keep my hands still and to keep me quiet. And she conquered it, and she never had to live with that her whole life. Our brain is amazing. And also about the transgender thing, the science didn't feel right. And I often wondered how many kids had actually followed through with suicide. Do you know, I can't find those numbers. Was it 2 or was it 1,500? There's a big difference in 2 and 1,500. And those 2 could have had other problems as well. I've always said if you have a problem, the best thing to do is do your best to deal with it and then wait. Wait a little while and see if it corrects itself, because time often reveals lies. This month, the Oxford Study of Sexual Medicine released a report where they investigated over 100,000, Julina, 100,000 transgenders who participated in their study. They concluded that people are more depressed and suicidal after the sex change surgeries. Now, that is not what we've been told, is it? The results were that depression more than doubled in males who had surgery. Without surgery, male depression was at 11.5. But after surgery, depression jumped to 25.4%. And anxiety went from 2.6% with no surgery to 12.8% after surgery. Now, depression in females went from 14.6 with surgery to 22.9, or with no surgery, 14.6 with no surgery to 22.9 with surgery. I'm sorry, I'm getting crazy reading these details. And females' anxiety also went up. So now we are getting the results. The results are in. All these surgeries do not cure the problem. They don't even lessen the problem. These individuals need counseling and help to understand how beautiful and powerful they are in their original birth sex. That's it. What I feel like the real problem is that the medical and psychological associations needed a moneymaker. Kids and adults participating in these massive surgeries will be on medication and need medical help for the rest of their lives. Can you believe that? I've also read that the medications cause the deterioration of the skeletal system and other drastic medical issues, heart, lungs, all kinds of issues. I know a person whose bones and tendons have deteriorated to the point he is now crippled. Transgender is a statistical and a moral lie. And if you believe the lie, your problems get worse and they last a lifetime. Oh, sure, some people maybe are okay with what was done and they like to promote themselves a lot. But it's very rare, and this is very dangerous. The sad, real lie behind all of this is that those psychologists and psychiatrists and medical people are telling the individual that they are too weak and too fragile to ever get over any medical, psychological, or life issue. Poor you. You are pathetic. You are a victim and a pitiful excuse for the skin you're in. Let me fix that. And that is a bald-faced lie. You can survive and thrive even when life hands you a bad deal. Do you agree, Julene?
Oh, Deb, those are such compelling statistics that you just shared. The results are in, and we're seeing the truth of what's really going on here. I absolutely believe that from the most difficult times in my life, from the mistakes that I made, those actually were my best teachers, because it got me to a point of understanding, but I had to kind of go through some of those valleys in my life. I think it was Benjamin Franklin said, that which causes you the greatest pain are your greatest instructors over time, if you will just stay the course, right? That we can really recycle our adversity. My mama always used to say, you can turn your adversity into your ministry, that which was your struggles at certain times in your life. And we all have stories from our childhood that are difficult, but through those difficult times, we developed our message of what we're able to bear witness and testimony of. So yes, we are in a spiritual crisis. Our president has said we've got to get God back into our country. RFK Jr. at that Maha roundtable I went to the other day, he said this moral crisis is particularly being aimed at our young people. And so we need to, circle the wagons around them and let them know that, God is in the business of recycling your pain and using it for someone else's gain. It's going to be the means of you being able to help someone someday. That, all the things that we experience in our life in our teenage years will actually work towards our good someday. You'll be able to be more empathetic and help the next person coming up behind you. And so I think to me, it's such a reminder that I have to make sure that my doors are open to kind of young kids that are lost and wayward and struggling, not to look down on them as shameful and they're lost, but to make sure my heart and my hands are open to them and they can feel that. We want to make sure the church doors are open to them, that they feel safe and comfortable coming because they are in crisis and they need us. They don't need our judgment or our casting our eyes, the other way. When we see them, they need our smiles, they need our love, they need our truth, speaking it in the most lovingly way possible, because what the other side has offered, it's proven it's not working. They're not any happier, so they are seeking, and we want to make sure we're open to receive them when they come our way.
Oh, Julene, I love talking to you. This is not in my notes, and we didn't discuss this at all, but in giving your example there, you reminded me of something that happened when I was a teenager. My mom and dad were pastors, and anytime you pastor a church, Daddy said it is not a perfect place. It is a hospital for sick sinners.
Mm-hmm.
And kind of, he said that because problems happen. People come in with their own problems and problems happen. And I remembered when you were talking that I was probably 13, maybe 14, and something was going on. And I was crying, and Mom came over. She passed my bedroom, and she came in. She said, "What's going on?" I said, because I'm an only child. And I said, I think God made a mistake, and I really wish I was a boy because I could help Daddy more. I could help him with these problems that are going in. And it wasn't that I wanted to change my sex. I just felt like that had God made me a boy, I would be that strong person to protect my dad, and get in there and do things. And I remembered when you were talking what my mom said. She said, "Debbie, are you crazy?" She said, "God created you for a reason. And yeah, that guy could stand beside him and kind of be partners with him. But there's so much more that you can do because you're a woman. And she began to point out the things that I could do. And it just solved my little heart and made me feel like, okay, I was empowered. Well, God did this for a reason. So here I go. Look out. I may be a girl, but I'm still going to stand beside my dad and do what I can. And I found that there were ways that I could get in and talk to people that probably a male could not. So it did change. What do you think?
Oh, and thank God for your little mama, who was probably, along with your daddy, the best teacher that you could have ever had. And that day she taught you. And because you trusted her and you had a good relationship with her, you knew that she was right and everything was going to be okay. And God made you just exactly who you were supposed to be. I mean, that's the parent of a that's the power of a parent who understands their role. Their most important role is to raise up those kids and teach them truth.
Right. Yes. Now, I did have another example. I'll just mention to all of our listeners, get Riley Gaines' book, Swimming Against the Current. Boy, she tells the story of her father taking her on a trip in the middle of winter. And he had her put on a swimsuit, and he took her to an outside pool and insisted she jump in the freezing water. She protested, but he insisted that she could do it. He told her to use her brain to convince herself that the cold didn't matter. So she jumped in, felt the awfulness of such cold water, but she stayed 4 minutes. And yes, she used her mind to convince herself that she could do it. That experience, like you said, Julene, that experience became a great tool of hers to fight back at the problems in life. You can overcome anything if you convince yourself that you are strong enough to do it. So get her book. Julene, what do you say?
Well, and thank God for her daddy, who taught her a lesson that was going to carry her through her life. She's still such a young woman in her early 20s, but would give her the courage to stand before hostile crowds someday and stand for truth, right?
Yeah.
And, it makes me think today, this very day, the Department of Education is being dismantled. And President Trump is going to sign an executive order at the White House. I was supposed to be there, Debbie, but I'm on travel. You can see I'm not in my home today. I'm on travel. And I just love how he is pushing back, and he's trying to encourage, America to decisions that are best had and solved and seen are at the local level. That's how you maintain your freedom, strong local self-government. So he wants, how we educate our children to go back to the states, to the state school board, to the local school board, and mostly within the four walls of our home. Mom and dad, I've said it and I'll say it again, will be the best teachers their children will ever have. These woke institutions, these, agencies 3,000 miles away trying to tell us how to train up and teach our children are, clearly under the Department of Education. And did you know the average salary of the Department of Education is $145,000? And we went from being number one in all areas, decades ago, to being number 40 in many areas. And so clearly it's not working for some entity that doesn't know your child to tell you how to best educate your child. And so I just think that, what President Trump is doing by shrinking the government and sending these problems or these responsibilities back to the states is so in keeping with what our founding fathers intended. And, of course, we don't want our children to suffer. And of course, they're going to have struggles, but it's those struggles that builds muscles, right? Our astronauts came home a few days ago. Elon sent his SpaceX Dragon to retrieve the astronauts that have been up in space for 9 months. And we know, look, we'd all like our children not to have any problems and to be able to give them a pill or surgery and solve all their problems and they'll be happy. But we know that's not life. Life is not a zero gravity experience. In fact, those astronauts for 9 months with no gravity, I'm sure they lost muscle mass and bone density and they became weaker. We need to teach our children that when you're having challenges and difficult emotions and heartaches, whether you have a little birth, defect or a mental struggle or an illness or something, if you can work your way through it, it will be the springboard to your success, right? that our problems have the potential to increase our capacity to do good. And so that needs to be the message. And that message is best had within the four walls of the home and within the local community and within the schools, the teachers that love the children, to be able to speak truth to them and not just speak a curriculum that was, put together 3,000 miles away in Washington, D.C.
I love it, Julene. You're exactly right. You are exactly right. And that is going to be a new phrase of mine. Life is not a zero gravity experience. I love that. That's not a quote. You came up with that, right?
Maybe. Who knows? I just thought of those astronauts bobbing around with no resistance, and it didn't make them stronger. They need you. We need to push those muscles and lift those weights to get stronger.
Yes.
We need to have heartache and discouragement and trials. It makes us stronger in the end.
I love it. I love it. Maybe I'll start calling you instead of saying, I wish I could go walking with you. I'll say, let's do some mental muscle building here. I think that's great. That's what makes our children strong and able to handle life. That's why I heard that Elon Musk had been severely bullied and beaten up, almost lost his life when he was younger. And maybe that's what made him able to take what's going on right now.
Yeah.
I think you're exactly right. Life is not a zero gravity experience. I love that. Well, Julene, so many lies, so little time. We have to cut it off for today, but my tip for today is don't believe the flim-flam man. Demand truth, demand science, demand competence and the ability to present all sides of the issue so you can see the truth. When someone comes out with something new, demand the research and the true statistics, and don't be afraid of the truth. Get in there and fight, fight, fight for the truth. Remember to give it a few years to pan out. Wait and see what happens, because time often reveals lies. What is your tip, Julene?
Love that. And in the meantime, while we're fighting away, let's be careful about how we complain about things. Instead of complaining about lies, let's offer a better alternative. Instead of cursing those damned lies, we turned into cussing women just for today. Instead of, complaining about those damned lies, I'm going to say it again because I don't cuss very often. Let's start lighting some candles, to shoo the darkness away. Let's take some little lost, wayward children or teens or anyone that's struggling. Let's take them under our wing. Let's get involved with young people in our churches or our communities, our little nieces and nephews, anyone that might be struggling, and then model to them how to live in God's light, right? How to live in God's truth and in God's love. And don't be reactors, be creators. Criticize by creating something. Create something beautiful and then bring other people along in the process.
I love it. I love it. You're exactly right. Wow. Thank you for being with us today. Subscribe to this podcast and join us again. You can ask a question or request that we dig into a specific topic by writing Debbie at debbiejansen.com. Thanks again to our wonderful producer, Ken Jansen. This is Debbie Jansen, and I'm sticking to the truth.
And I'm Julene Jackson, and we hope you will keep sticking to the truth. We'll see you next time. Take care.
Bye-bye.